Hey, welcome back to Dad Life Chess. This is Joel. Thank you for watching this video. Today, I'm going to start covering my recent tournament. Well, it's been over a month now. The North American Open that was played in Las Vegas right after the Christmas holiday in 2021, a little over a month ago. I ended up playing in the under 1700 section. As you see, my rating going into the tournament was 1676. And as you'll find out through these videos, most of my opponents were actually rated lower than me. You would think that that means I won all my games. Spoiler alert, I did not. But I learned a lot at this tournament. There was a lot of ups and downs. Didn't do as well as I would have liked to, but definitely learned a lot from these games and continue to learn a lot from these games. I was able to go over all of my games with my coach, and that was kind of what I was waiting for. That's why it took a little while for me to post these videos and record them for the channel. But I think all of these games have points that we can learn from, and hopefully they'll be entertaining. But I'll say this: if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. That helps me out a lot, and it's appreciated. And feel free to leave a comment. Let me know if you're enjoying this series. And if you're not enjoying it, then just let me know that too, I guess. Or you can keep that thought to yourself. That's always a possibility. All right, so my round one game, let me kind of give you set the scene here a little bit. The tournament ran actually the day after Christmas, so it was December 26th all the way through December 29th. Now, I knew the schedule and everything like that, so I ended up opting for the 3-day schedule instead of the 4-day schedule, which means my game started on the 27th. And it was a good thing I did that because flights got canceled and pushed around, and I would have never made it on time if I would have done the 4-day schedule. But what it means is my first 3 games on the 27th were actually, that was a Monday, were actually all three. My first two games were game 60 with a 10-second delay. The last rounds were longer time control, but so essentially on the first day you actually play 3 games instead of the normal 2. After this tournament, I kind of realized I don't know if I would do that again. I would probably opt for the longer schedule. I know that the vast majority of games that I play online are shorter, like blitz games and everything like that. But in these tournaments, you'd be surprised how fast time goes. And those game 60 with 10-second delay didn't exactly. I felt like I was always in time trouble in these first 2 games. But anyway, my first opponent, Aryan, really nice kid. He was actually 13 years old. So, and I ended up actually playing a lot of kids in this tournament. They are incredibly strong, incredibly gifted. They have bright futures ahead of them, but let's just be honest. They're scary. They're scary because they have potential and they are strong for sure. So I went ahead and opened up with my d4. My opponent played knight f6. I really had no chance to like prep for my opponent. I tried to find anything that I could see online and didn't really find anything. So I went ahead and started with my London system, which I often play, and he played b6, which is actually a very kind of a tricky line. You kind of move order white into kind of a less favorable London system. So I thought, well, okay, so first game, I wanted to not do anything crazy. I guess I could have played, knight f3. It was an option as well. Oftentimes, if they'll play e6 first and then b6 in this situation, you can play an early queen f3, and it gets interesting. So my opponent plays bishop b7. I went ahead and played knight f3. My opponent played e6. All this stuff is pretty standard. Knight bd2. And then my opponent played d6. And at this point, I actually started thinking for a little bit. I thought to myself, okay, this is an interesting setup. My opponent's kind of going more solid, not really showing me their intentions right away. There's a lot of flexibility. Oftentimes, they'll try and get this e5 push in. And so as kind of a general rule with this London setup, when your opponent plays d6, you often want to be ready for e5 or things like this. The knight coming out here. My opponent hasn't made like any strong attacking moves at this point, so I just played h3, giving my bishop a little bit of space. Actually, my coach appreciated that. My coach said it's kind of a nice little waiting move, almost, so to speak. So bishop e7, and right here I thought for a little bit. It's probably the time where I maybe took a few extra minutes in the opening here, and I normally play bishop d3. But with this setup, I thought maybe my opponent could play here and here, and so I opted for bishop e2. My opponent, my coach actually talked about this, and he asked this question. He said, well, let's say you play bishop d3, which is a more active square for the bishop to be on. How many moves will it take for black to be able to push e5? Well, you have one, then you have castles, you have the rook here, possibly the bishop would have to go back. And so in a way, it was kind of the first part of the first point of the game where I was kind of being scared of ghosts, so to speak. So, but I did play bishop e2. Not a bad move, not the most aggressive move, but I didn't really want the game to get like crazy tactical in the opening. I just wanted to get out of the opening with a decent position and see if I could outplay my opponent. My opponent played knight bd7, solid move, and here I should have just castled. I should have just castled and got my king safety and played from there. I ended up choosing to play c4, and ironically, it's one of those moments. It'd been a while since I played over the board tournament. The last tournament I played was in August. And so you're not getting a lot of experience. I mean, you're playing a lot of blitz games and rapid games online as we're training for this and getting ready for it. But as soon as I played c4, I was like, I don't like this move. And, hate to break it to you, but in these tournaments, they don't exactly let you do takebacks. I can't be like take back requested. So also, by the way, takebacks are never, ever do takebacks. Just want to throw that out there. That's random, but don't do that. Yeah, so, you make a move, you're kind of stuck with it, and I didn't like it, because immediately I thought my opponent's going to play c5, and then it's just going to he's going to have a better position on this side. Exactly what my opponent did, played c5, and so I didn't like it. I was like, oh, man, what am I, I didn't like this idea of this structure. I felt like he's going to get pressure on the c file. I just didn't like my pawn move. So I played rook c1, expecting the possibility of they be on the open file. My opponent played rook c8. I played a3, kind of thinking to do something like this. And then my opponent played a5. At this point, I thought to myself, okay, my opponent has made a weakness here. Not only that, but this d6 pawn is a little bit on the weak side. So I stopped and I thought, okay, this is a weakness. I'm going to see if I can try and target that weakness after we get through the opening. So finally, on move 11, I castled. My opponent castled. And right here, I make a move that is... It's an interesting idea. It's nowhere near the #1 best move. But because I played c4, after playing knight b d2, I realized I wanted my knight to be here. And how does the knight move? Yeah, the knight moves in an L shape. So I wanted my knight on c3, where they could possibly jump to b5, and so I ended up underdeveloping my knight. I played knight b1. I showed this to my coach, and my coach actually said, it's not the most active move, and it's not even the best move, but he appreciated the fact that it was a move with a plan and idea. Now, I didn't exactly follow through perfectly, but because I did that, obviously now the e4 square is open and unprotected, so my opponent played knight e4. And here, I actually played knight c3. My coach recommended, he said, well, if you worked that hard to get your knight from from D2 back to B1, and you want it to be on C3, possibly into B5. I said, what about this move? Now, this move again is there's a lot of variations, and Stockfish throws out some stuff, and it says black has a slight advantage here, but it's playing with the idea of trying to eliminate this knight. Even if something like this happens, my coach said you could take, and then you can actually play D5 in this setting. And I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but this might have been a better idea to try and get my knight planted on C3. But instead, I played knight C3, and my opponent played knight D F6, solidifying his knight on the E4 square, and I played queen B3, targeting this pawn, planning something, maybe knight A4, something like that. Well, my opponent takes. Now, at this point, I was okay with taking back because I thought, okay, now we got the B file, the possibility of attacking that pawn. We have some targets, something to work with. My opponent actually played knight D7. My opponent wanted to protect the B6 pawn, and by doing this, I thought to myself, okay, he's retreating his knight. He's decentralizing it, so to speak. So I thought, well, I'm going to get my last rook in the game. So I played rook FD1. And here my opponent played queen C7. Again, putting a little bit of more protection on the D6 pawn. And so this is the game of the retreating knights. I played knight D2. My idea is I want to jump my knight here. Possibly sometime I want to maybe trade off this bishop, get my knight into the position where I can start attacking this D6 pawn. So my opponent plays rook Fe8. I end up playing bishop F3. Want to exchange off the light square bishop. I think to myself, my bishop is worse than his bishop, and my opponent played in this position played E5. Now, there is a lot of possibilities at this point. And I thought about taking. Matter of fact, there's quite a few ways that white can get a slight advantage. I ended up opting for keeping the tension with bishop H2. This is a little more concrete. Takes and then takes. I can play bishop G3. I can take here on bishop takes B7. But they're all about equal-ish. White's doing a little bit better in this position. But I ended up playing bishop H2, keeping the tension in the center. And my opponent then takes on F3. I'm able to take back with my knight. And then my opponent played F6. This was the point of the game where I thought to myself, okay, this doesn't look great for black. As Ben Feingold would say, Grandmaster Ben Feingold, never play F6. I was like, looking at my opponent's position, they're kind of cramped back here. They've got this, pawn structure. They're kind of like, everything's like having to hold itself together. Like every single one of his pieces are like awkwardly trying to defend the weak points in his position. So I end up playing in this position, D takes E5. And my opponent, I was fully expecting them to take back here. But I don't think my opponent wanted to give me the D file or open up the D file. So my opponent actually played F takes E5. And right here, I thought for a little bit, and I said, okay, my whole plan this game was around the queen side. However, now all of this weaknesses over here, especially on these light squares, I was like, you know what? This queen's done its job. I'm probably not going to win that pawn. So I drop back queen C7. The idea is I'm coming over here. I'm gonna be coming in and causing some problems. I'm gonna be able to get my pieces over. We might even get a kingside attack. Who knows, right? So my opponent sees that, plays rook F8, stopping that. And this next move was actually my favorite move of the game. It was one of my it's actually interesting. The Stockfish actually recommends it as the number one move, but there's a reason behind it. There's an idea behind it. And matter of fact, when I showed this to my coach said that was one of the best moves of the game, for sure. And the move is, I had to ask myself, what do I want to accomplish in this position? This bishop is like a glorified pawn. It's all of the pawns are on dark squares. And so in the long run, because it's kind of blocked up in the center, I would love to exchange my bishop for his knight. So I know that the knight's probably going to come here. I end up playing bishop g3. The idea is whenever this knight goes here, I want to be able to trade it off by playing bishop h4. And ironically, the game actually allowed that. But I really liked the idea of getting my bishop here with the possibility of playing the bishop to h4, exchanging off the knight. And so anyway, my opponent played rook ce8, trying to bring some of his pieces back over to the king side. And at this point, I play knight b2. What's my idea? We're coming into these squares, okay? Putting some pressure on this d6 pawn. My opponent, seeing that, doesn't want to let me have the e4 square, immediately plays knight f6. At this point in the game, my opponent actually was getting into really serious time trouble. And like, I even wrote like little marks on my score sheet, like time wise, how much time each one of us had. And my opponent was actually almost playing on the delay. My opponent was under, at this point, I think under like 5 minutes for the rest of the game. So serious time trouble. I think I had, maybe at this point I was maybe 15 to 20 minutes left. We had put some thought into it up to this point. So going forward, I knew my opponent was in time trouble, but he had to speed up, had to play a little bit faster. So I played bishop h4. And I think this was this idea, and ironically, Stockfish says is the best move, okay? I just really liked this idea of fighting for these squares, trying to exchange off this knight. My opponent plays queen c6, again, trying to, protect the e4 square. I gladly take that knight. My opponent takes back, and instead of playing knight e4, I thought to myself, if I could exchange off these queens, my knight is going to cause havoc. This square, the e4 square, is it's basically an outpost in the sense that like it is going to be a beast on the e4 square. So I played queen e4. My opponent said, nope, we're not trading queens. I thought, well, thank you. I'll get in here. And now I'm going to centralize my queen. It's on a light square, never going to be attacked by this bishop. Matter of fact, the queen is like, it just cannot be attacked. It's just going to be sitting there. And so my opponent plays, actually my opponent played rook e6. I was totally expecting him to move his king. Played rook e6, I play knight e4. My opponent plays bishop e7, and right here he's really in time trouble, really in time trouble. I'm getting more into time trouble because we're, I'm making moves a little bit faster, but at the same time I'm starting to see my clock kind of go down, and that plays a role actually into the end of the game. So my opponent actually right here, I'm sorry. What I did is I ended up going over here. So I thought, okay, well, let's just poke at little weaknesses in your position and see how you handle this. Now, there's an interesting idea here. I was thinking there's a tactic. Basically, if my opponent plays here, rook to defend this pawn. There's a cute little tactic. This queen's undefended. This rook's kind of loose. There is a brilliant tactic. Knight takes c5, and this knight is just you just can't take it. I mean, it's there's nothing you can do. The knight's gonna, if you take here, you take with check, and so my opponent sees this. I was expecting rook b8. It's kind of, actually, I was really expecting it because my opponent was in such time trouble, but my opponent actually didn't play that. Instead, after rook b1, my opponent played bishop d8, which actually is the best move. But this does give up this knight. So I took, it gives up the pawn. So knight takes d6, and then my opponent says, let's just tuck the king away a little bit. No worries there. And at this point, I thought, you know what? I'm just gonna double up on the d file. Smooth sailing, no problem, right? So my opponent plays here. After that, my opponent plays bishop c7, and right here I thought, oh, that doesn't work. That doesn't work because I'm gonna basically force the exchange of queens, and my opponent played queen c8. I took here, fully expecting to take back, but my opponent played there. I thought, oh, my opponent wants to take here. So we're really down on time. It's starting to get a little tricky. And so I thought, well, you know what? I'm just going to put a stop to that. I'm going to play queen d7. And then my opponent played here, queen b7. A little cheeky move, threatening checkmate. And so I thought, you know what? I do not want that. That's not a fun way to end this game. I know I'm clearly winning, but I have to basically convert this win. I played rook d5. My opponent played h6, giving his king a little bit of space, and so I ended up playing knight b5. We're really down on time at this point, and I'm kind of sweating. I'm like thinking to myself, I gotta solidify this. I gotta exchange off these queens. I gotta do something here. My opponent said no more exchange of queens. And I could have gone a lot of different ways, but I ended up choosing rook bd1, just getting the rooks all in the file here. My opponent played king h7, wants to just not allow any exchanges of pieces, maybe getting my rook down on the d8. Somehow he's just playing really fast at this point. My opponent, I play e4. I kind of want to stop this diagonal, and then my opponent plays rook f6. I think to myself, okay, I can at least exchange off the queens. I thought I played queen d8. My opponent said no exchange of queens, but I thought, okay, this is going to be bad. I'm going to play knight d6 here, and my opponent played queen c6. I played knight f5. I'm thinking I'm going to fork, come in here, checkmate threats, all this stuff is happening. But we're kind of blitzing out moves. We're blitzing out moves at this point. My opponent plays queen a4, and I find right here the key move, which is knight e7, and checkmate is inevitable. But when you're playing over the board, you don't exactly see Stockfish. Stockfish is not saying, hey, it's mate and 7 at this point. So, you know, I think like my opponent had, you know, maybe, I think it's about a minute or less than a minute here. It was kind of crazy. I had a couple minutes left in the game. We're blitzing out these moves. I know I'm winning. I know I could feel it. And so I played queen g8 here, which is correct. My opponent played king h6. I played queen h8. I'm thinking I'm just gonna try my best to just exchange off all these pieces, take the take the rooks off the board. I didn't want to have any kind of weird. There was just stuff. I was afraid that something else would happen, so I ended up taking this rook. He ends up taking back with the rook. I play rook takes e5. Excuse me. King f6. I played rook f5, and then my opponent played king e6. At this point, okay, my opponent is less than a minute. My opponent has seconds left, but there is a delay. So every time you hit the clock doesn't start until 10 seconds. For 10 seconds, and then it starts clicking down. I pick up my queen, and I bring it over to this square. My opponent physically gasped and jumped. My opponent went, I looked and I realized if I would have played Queen E8, I would be losing. You see, all of a sudden, the game would have been completely different. And even though my opponent would be playing on increment, on the delay, he would have been able to convert this. I was going to, we're time scramble here. I was going to play this move, but I hovered over and I was about to set it down on that square, and my opponent physically jumped. I grabbed the queen. It was the craziest thing. I grabbed the queen, and I'm like thinking to myself, oh my soul, I almost completely blundered. And it was literally the tell from my opponent. I felt bad for the kid afterwards. I talked to him, I talked to his dad. I was like, oh man, he was so close. I would have, oh man, I couldn't explain it. So long story short, instead I saw it. I was like, always be checking. I gotta be always be finding the right check. Played Queen G8. My opponent played here, and then I ended up playing Queen F7, checkmate. This game could have literally fallen apart right at the end, and I would have been completely losing in one move. Thankfully for me, that's not how it ended up, and I was able to checkmate my opponent, but it taught me a lot. It taught me there is in these games, you got to be careful. It doesn't matter how much time trouble you're in, and oh, it scared me. Matter of fact, that emotional roller coaster that was game one, like, had me amped. This game had me amped. Okay. And going into I knew I had a round two game in literally like an hour or something like that, hour and a half or something. So I went back up to my hotel room and tried to mentally get ready for the next game. And so we'll have to figure out how that one went next time. But yeah, it's kind of a fun game. It was there were some interesting ideas in this game. I was really excited. I was really happy with this idea. Bishop G3, the idea of exchanging off, fighting for these squares. It was a game of ideas. It was a game kind of back and forth. My opponent really pressed and tried his best in the end to complicate things. Thankfully, I was able to kind of calm the storm and not play the losing move, Queen E8. That would have been painful. That would have been really painful. But hey, thanks for watching this video. Look forward to recording the rest of the rounds in the days ahead. And anyway, if you have any comments, please leave them. Any constructive criticism, encouraging things, or just want to say howdy, please leave a comment, subscribe, all those things. Until next time, catch you later. Thanks for watching Dad Life Chess.